come and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this group for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
This is weird.
My camera is missing. It's a mystery. Where did it go? Hello there. Welcome into Off the Edge. My name is Jacob Harrison. So glad that you could be with us here tonight. Got a lot to get into. Going to have my breakdowns of A-Day. I also released my third mock draft of the year, this being a 2-rounder, and we will dive into that. I got the Patriots fans on staff a little fired up, trying to think like a, galaxy brain here, trying to outwit the fans. But, we'll get into that in the second hour. The first hour is going to almost entirely consist of just the A-Day festivities that we took part in. I was there for Tide 100.9, had an absolute blast covering the scrimmage. And on top of that, just seeing everybody enjoying Crimson Tide football live and in person. It was awesome to see that go down this weekend. On top of that, we are going to have Joey Blackwell of Bama Central join the show at 8:15 to get his thoughts. He was there as well. Great mind, great writer, and he's going to give us his insights on that as well. He'll give us a little update on baseball as well. He's very, very closely knit with the baseball team. You'll have to forgive me. I'm still a little bit out of breath from running down to my car and then running up. I need to get more cardio in. Need to get more cardio in so I can breathe. I'm sweating just running down the stairs and back up again. It's pitiful. It's sad. But we'll recover. Got to remind you, the show is brought to you every single Monday and Friday night by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com. You see the vintage Jeff Gordon hat there by one Tommy Paradise. He walked into Alabama Vintage under the Crimson Awning, 2210 University Boulevard, and brought that baby home with him. You can do the same. Alabama Vintage clothing and memorabilia, whether it's a vintage t-shirt, commemorative t-shirt of a past victory, or a sweater, a starter jacket, you name it. Charlie's got it. Go give him a look-see and take something home to help get that Alabama fandom on brand. AlabamaVTG.com, on the socials, Alabama Vintage as well. So, opening thoughts on A-Day. I love this defense. I am in love with this defense, particularly the front seven. The front seven is monstrous. 6, 7, 8 deep. Are you kidding me? On the interior defensive line. Now it appears we're at least 4 deep off the edge.
Zing.
Yeah. We need to get like a drop for that or something, Tommy. But I mean, Chris Braswell, Demoy Kennedy coming off the edge and just wreaking havoc. It was incredible to see that display. Now, granted, offensive line didn't play great. Things happen, you can control what you can control. But overall, I was just ecstatic with what I saw from that defense. Deontay Lawson, the freshman linebacker, paired up very, very well with Jalen Moody at the inside linebacker. Loved that as well. Very impressed from top to bottom with the defense. I know everybody comes away and they're like, oh, Bryce Young, oh, Ajayi Hall. And I can appreciate that. But this 2021 Crimson Tide team comes down to the abilities of this defense, I think, to carry it home. This is the Nick Saban led team that Crimson Tide fans have been missing for a while. A team that is bolstered by its defense. That's what you're getting this year, I feel like. And with the amount of depth that's on this defense, you got to put that into work. You got to strap onto that and let it carry you. That's not saying that Bryce Young or this offense is going to struggle, but it's going to take some time. And if you're walking out against those Hurricanes week 1 and you're thinking, oh, we're just going to blow them out like we have the past 2 or 3 years, I don't necessarily agree right now based off of what I've seen from this offense. And yes, there were a lot of people missing on the offense. Emil Ekiyor, John Mechie, Brian Robinson. And I can understand and I can accept that. But where we're at right now, this is a defensive team. This is a team that is going to be carried by the defense, at least for the short term. And then long term, it's going to be exactly what we had hoped we would get out of defenses for the past several years. I know people have been harping on Pete Golding, haven't been crazy about his defenses. But at the end of the day, he has improved. He coached the best defense in the SEC last year. Without a doubt. The best defense in the SEC. Gave up 19 points per game. That's the level of being the best defense in the SEC these days. You're going to give up points. You're going to give up yards. And luckily, Alabama has had the offenses to counterbalance that. And they're going to be in that point for a long while, I think. As long as Nick Saban's here. And he said Saturday, basically, he's not going anywhere anytime soon anyway, so there's nothing to stress about on that front. But defensively, this team has it figured out. And I feel very, very good about where this team is defensively, especially in the front seven. Hey, it took 2 plays. It took 2 plays for Tim Smith to go out for the white team and disrupt the play. Latham was the defense, was the lineman of the game, and he's on the 3rd or 4th string of defensive linemen. Now, he's had a great camp from the way I understand it. He's been doing great. But if you would have asked, some guy on University Boulevard who he thought would be the best defensive lineman for this team, Latham isn't it. You would get Tim Smith or the now engaged DJ Dale. You'd get Fedarian Mathis, who was a captain on the Crimson team, right? You'd get most undoubtedly you would get LeBron Ray. If he's healthy, LeBron Ray's the best defensive lineman on this team. LeBron Ray didn't play, obviously, but you get where I'm going with this. Alabama is rich defensively this year. Will Anderson didn't play. Chris Allen hardly played. And yet the pressure off the edge and from up the middle was something to really grab onto and enjoy now. It's something to carry with you for the next 3 months as we now sit idle and wait for Alabama Crimson Tide football to come our way. And I for one, I'm ready to see this defense feast on De'Aaron King and the Miami Hurricanes. It's for real now. Now, I will say, on the back end of the defense, there are still questions that have to be answered. Jalen Armour-Davis played very, very well, but he was also the guy that was covering Trayshawn Holden. Kool-Aid McKinstry played very, very well, but he was also the guy covering Ajayi Hall. We still don't know who that other outside corner is. And it may now, at this point, be a rotation. We do know that the star is going to be Malachi Moore, and we do know that the money is going to be Brian Branch, but we don't know who that outside corner opposite of Josh Jobe is. And that's somewhat concerning. That's something to keep an eye on. I'm not being negative. You got to look at all the points, James. You can always join the show in the comments section. Whatever brand that you are on, you can tell shut down on me. I've been nice to Paul Tyson. But we'll get into all the negatives and all the positives. But as far as the back end of the defense goes, I still feel really, really good about where it's at. You just might be in a rotation. I think Kool-Aid and Jalen Armour-Davis have both given rise to why they should be in the conversation to be that outside corner, because they both played well in spite of being the guys that were constantly targeted. They both played incredibly well. They made those receivers. Jalen Armour Davis made Trayshawn Holden, and Kool-Aid McKinstry made Ajayi Hall, made them both fight for every catch and fight for every yard that they got on Saturday. And that's something to take some pride in. And that's something to take with you through the summer, to feel like you have got a chance defensively to stay on pace. James brings up an excellent point. Will Reichard, man, I don't know what happened. Listening to the folks in the media booth, everyone I heard after they groaned said he was perfect all throughout spring. What has happened? And, I heard somebody say today, I don't remember who, that, he's in front of a crowd now. Maybe that's a thing that we're going to have to work through, is kicking in front of a crowd. Well, he did kick in front of crowds last year. He was perfect all year, field goal or extra point. Perfect, 100%, blemish free. It is a little concerning that he missed those kicks. Do I think that Will Reichard is done? That he's got the yips or this, that, and the other? No, because it's one showing that obviously was against the precedent that we know about him. We know that when he stepped in as a freshman, he missed his first kick, got a second, both from 50-plus yards, right? He's got it within him. But he is still a kicker. He is still a human being. And those guys, even in the pros, they miss a lot of kicks. It just comes down to sound technique and circumstance. And maybe the circumstances got out ahead of Will Reichard. But I'm sure he wouldn't be the kicker at Alabama. And I know this goes against the precedent, but he wouldn't be the kicker at Alabama if he couldn't get back in the lab, figure out what went wrong, and fix it. So I'm not stressing about Will Reichard, but I know a lot of Alabama fans are, and I know that they are rightfully going to be dwelling on this for the next 3 months. We'll get into everything concerning A-Day with Joey Blackwell on the other side of this break. I'm Jacob Harrison. Thank you for hanging out with us. You can always join the show in the chat. If you got a question for Joey, drop it in there, and we'll see if we can squeeze it in. My name's Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Welcome back into Off the Edge. My name is Jacob Harrison. So glad you could be with us tonight. We're getting ready to talk with my good friend Joey Blackwell of Bama Central at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account. He was with us in Bryant-Denny Stadium soaking in all the goings on at A-Day. Joey, welcome into the show, man. How are you doing tonight?
Doing all right, Jacob. How about yourself on this wonderful evening?
I'm doing great. Listen, I do want to start with baseball, not as a let's get it out of the way thing, but they did go 2-for-1 in the 3-game series with Auburn this weekend, with 2 walk-offs too. Connor Prelip is back, maybe not at 100%, but that's at least a momentum builder. Something to get morale back up. And then they walk out of the weekend with an SEC Player of the Week as well. Just talk about the baseball team, where they're at right now, and where you can kind of see them going as the season progresses and they get more healthy.
Well, it's kind of a turnaround for Alabama baseball as of late. Just a couple of weeks ago, this team lost 9 of their last 10 games, and now they've won 6 of their last 7. They swept Texas A&M on the road. They picked up that 19-point win over Sanford in the midweek, and like you said, they had 2 wins against a Auburn team that a lot of people underestimate. Coach Brad Bohannon was talking about how this Auburn team, people aren't really impressed with them, but they're still one of the best hitting teams in the conference. They have a lot of 1-point losses in the conference so far this year, and of course, look at how they lost Alabama. They lost, both their losses were by 1 point, and one of them in extra innings. So, but very impressed by this Alabama baseball team. This seems like they're finally making good contact. They're seeing the ball better the past week and a half. Things are really starting to look up for this Alabama baseball team. Now, there's still a long way to go in the season. Right now we're right at about the halfway point of SEC play. And, of course, the SEC West is what I've been saying for a while now, is one of the most competitive divisions in all of college sports. And Alabama still has a long way to go. But, they're on track to make their first SEC tournament since 2016, which, after last year's disappointing finish to the season being cut short due to COVID-19, it's really good to see this team might still have something to fight for this year.
Yeah, and it's just good just to see other successful programs at Alabama as well. I mean, just to know that you've got the number of the Auburn Tigers across the state is something to hang on to. We've dominated those guys across the state in every sport so far. It's softball's turn up next, so hopefully they can get the job done as well. But moving on to A-Day, it was the first time you and I have seen each other in person since I want to say the Senior Bowl. So that speaks pretty big volumes, not only at how life kind of runs its course, but also how the pandemic has kind of kept people apart. Well, on Saturday, of course, all of Alabama Crimson Tide fandom was in Tuscaloosa to soak in A-Day. Before we dive into the analysis of the game and the players, the fans deserve a little bit of time as well, just for being able to get back in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Just from your perspective, what did it mean for you to see 47,218 fans in Bryant-Denny Stadium as well as Tuscaloosa? The strip was lit up with people in crimson and white. What did all that mean to you coming back in for spring football?
Well, I remember walking up to the stadium, and there was kind of a hush over the crowd. It wasn't as loud as I thought it would be outside the stadium, that is. But I immediately was, kind of took comfort in the fact that, last year with Walk of Champions, fans were kept a long way away from the players. This year, there's still barriers up, or there were still barriers up, but they were much closer. You had a line forming outside the Tuska statue that was moved there behind the University of Alabama sign. And then once you got inside the stadium, of course, one noticeable change to me was there was enough fans to not have piped in fan noise anymore, which I've always been a huge advocate against piped in crowd noise. So having enough fans to not need that anymore, seeing almost 50,000 fans, it provided a sense of not normalcy but progress, that we're getting back to where we were before. And that we still have a long way to go as far as having full capacity, but at the rate things are going, they've already announced that they're planning on full capacity next season when it comes to football. Baseball has also seen an uptick in capacity at Sewell Thomas Stadium as well. and they're still making incremental increases, hopefully, as the season goes on, to match other SEC schools. I know that Arkansas, I think they're up to somewhere up higher than 50%. I'm not sure what the official number is, but you're seeing this all across the country and more fans showing up. And credit to the fans that showed up on Saturday. It was loud. It was just an exciting environment to be in for the first time, in over a year, to have that many fans in one arena in Alabama, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And man, it got me excited for next season.
It did me as well. I was pretty hyped just walking from the corner at Buffalo Phil's and then across, the Walk of Champions and in front of Tusca and just seeing people again, just being out in front with the Crimson Tide fandom as I made my way up to the press box. That was one of the cooler moments throughout the entire weekend for me. So getting into the game, as much as I love the defense, the ratings would tell me that I got to start with the quarterback. I think they did all right, but Bryce Young, certainly, he goes out there 25 of 44 attempts, for 333 yards, a touchdown to Cameron Latu that was pretty impressive. It was more impressive on Latu's part, I would argue, but nonetheless, it does appear that Bryce Young has solidified his position as the starting quarterback. But as well as Paul Tyson, he didn't really have a lot of opportunities either. Just your perspective on this quarterback battle, especially with the starter Bryce Young.
Well, to me, I'll admit, I never saw it as a battle. I still don't think it is. I've always had Bryce Young far and above Tyson. And that's no disrespect to Tyson. He's a fantastic quarterback. But we have to remember, Bryce Young's a five-star dual-threat quarterback. He fits that mold that Alabama's kind of needed from Mac Jones being the outlier. He kind of fits that mold of that Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, style of play that we've seen at Alabama as of late. I got to admit, though, I was a little disappointed in his effort. Yes, he had 333 yards on Saturday, but he only had the one score. And like you said, I kind of credit Latu more to that than Young, because of that move he made near the end zone, which you don't see tight ends have that kind of flexibility and that dexterity very often. But I think that the thing about Bryce, though, is that there's still a long way to go before next season. He was still having to play against a first team Alabama defense that, granted, had some injuries, but is still a fantastic defense. The defense is going to be the strength of this team this year, I think, which is going to be kind of a revert back to the Alabama teams of old under Saban, not necessarily how we've seen it lately, but I still think, there's a lot of time. We have to remember that Bryce Young still has limited game experience, with there not being an A-Day last year and him only having action in limited capacity last year behind Mac Jones. I think that we're going to see him kind of take on a better leadership role over the summer, and it won't surprise me if he's, coming out a top-tier quarterback, in the first week. But we didn't, at least for me personally, I didn't really see that this past Saturday. But that being said, there's still a long way to go, and I have no doubt he's a hard worker and he's going to improve.
Well, for each of the quarterbacks that stepped out there, they all had to deal with struggles on the offensive line. Paul Tyson, particularly, he had three freshmen out there in front of him, and they just really struggled. And you really can't blame them on that front, but it does make it difficult to evaluate the quarterbacks. I think Bryce did pretty well, all things considered, especially with Trayshawn Holden really being his number one receiver. Jaleel Billingsley didn't play very often either. But from that offensive line situation, Evan Neal was out there. Chris Owens was out there. He was missing Emil Ekiyor, but it still feels like we're quite a ways away from figuring out who those starting five will be for Alabama when they suit up against Miami.
Yeah, and Chris Owens, Evan Neal, Emil Ekiyor, they're all guaranteed. Well, not guaranteed, but nothing's ever guaranteed. But they're all expected to be day one starters for Alabama, this coming season. And yeah, like you said, Ekiyor's hurt. The offensive line has definitely taken the biggest fall, I think, in this offseason out of any of the position groups. And you have to look at who they lost. They lost Deontay Brown. They lost Alex Leatherwood. And let's not forget Landon Dickerson. They had a huge loss in leadership. And I think this team this year is going to see a lot of growing pains in terms of, having leaders emerge. We heard Jordan Battle himself say that even Saban hasn't discovered who the leaders are on this team yet. think that was Jordan Battle. And, there's still a long way to go as far as determining leaders. Once they have that leadership, because this team is so young, we'll start to see that emerge. And going back to what I was saying about Bryce Young, one point that I was going to make before we moved on from that was kind of going off of what you said was in Bryce Young's defense, when he's playing this fall, he's going to have all of his offensive weapons on one team. He's going to have John Mechie. He's going to have Brian Robinson behind him as running back. He's going to have, Keelan Robinson, taking passes on his side of the football, and as well as rushing it. He's going to have all those wide receivers on his side of the ball instead of having to compete against them. And I think that's really going to help him out a lot coming into next year.
What was surprising, despite so many guys not dressing out for one reason or another, the lone, freshman out of those top four and the three that are here in this year's recruiting class, Ajayi Hall was one of the standout guys. Trayshawn Holden was kind of a surprise to me. I thought we'd see more out of guys like Xavier Williams and Javon Baker, but nonetheless, that's who stepped up. I really like Trayshawn Holden. And when we finish up with you, I'll get into that. But who were the receivers that stood out to you, and what did you enjoy about their game?
Well, Trayshawn Holden, for one, he led both teams in receptions with 989 yards. But one person that, you haven't really heard a lot of people talk about that really impressed me was Jace McClellan. The guy, he led the Crimson team in rushing with 12 attempts for 46 yards. And then on the receiving side of it, he also led the Crimson receivers in the number of receptions with 7. Hall had the most yards with 72. McClellan was right behind him with 62 of his own. As far as people that stand out, it was Jace McClellan for me. I know a lot of people haven't really said that, but to be able to rush and to catch as well against a very good, second team defense, when you have Paul Tyson and Braxton Barker throwing to you, I was really impressed with Jace McClellan.
What is it about Jace McClellan that's setting him apart? I really like Roydell Williams. He's got that breakaway speed, but when Jace McClellan gets the ball, they both had 12 carries for about 43, 46 yards each. But when it comes to McClellan, it feels like he's the one that's got that edge to steal the most carries away from Brian Robinson.
I think McClellan, is a little bit, I think he's approached this camp with a much, they both approached it with tough mindsets, but I think with McClellan, he has a lot more strength behind his rushing. He reminds me of kind of Mark Ingram type of running back. He's just going to bowl people over. And I think that's why we see him picking up a couple of extra yards here and there. His longest rush today was only 10 yards, but I think he's a little faster than Mark Ingram, so that might be a bad comparison. But I think if there's anybody on this team that has an opportunity to take some carries away from Brian Robinson, of course, you also have to consider Keelan Robinson, but we don't even know if he's going to play running back. He might be a wide receiver.
Yeah.
But I edge Jace McClellan in that just over Roydell Williams, and that's not a discredit to Roydell Williams at all. I just think that just what I've seen, we haven't seen any practices this year. The media, we haven't had any access, but just based off of what I've seen in one game, I really lean towards Jace McClellan as far as somebody that can take some carries away.
Now to my favorite portion of A-Day. I fell in love with the defense. If the defense is so stacked in its depth, it's got at least 6 or 7, 8 deep on the interior defensive line. The edge rushers showed up to play, even though Will Anderson was out for the game and Chris Allen didn't play much. Deontay Lawson really stood out next to Jalen Moody. Both of those guys look like they can share reps next to Christian Harris when he returns. Just at least from the first front 7 before we get into the secondary. What impressed you the most? Who stood out the most to you about the guys up front for this defense in 2021?
Well, it starts out with, like I said, Deontay Lawson and Jalen Moody. They both had fantastic days, but also, I want to point out a guy in Chris Braswell. The guy had 5 tackles for them solo. He had 3 sacks on the game, and he forced a fumble. That guy is a monster. And I think he's going to do really well. This linebacker core, a lot of people were worried about it with the loss of Dylan Moses this year. And, also you have, of course, Christian Harris, you have Shane Lee, Will Anderson, but none of those guys played in the game this past week. So, but the other guys, the Jalen Moody's, the the Dante Lawson, the Chris Braswells all do so well. It inspired a lot of confidence in me. I know. You also had Jackson Bratton had a great game as well. Linebacker, he had 6 tackles and 1 forced fumble. Just a lot of good coming into this linebacker unit. We knew it was going to be good, but seeing how deep they're going to be should be really encouraging if you're an Alabama football fan.
I do want to get a little bit more into the edge rushers because that's my baby. Will Anderson. I've been very open. I've kind of got a man crush on Will Anderson. He's by far and away my favorite player on this team right now. You don't name your show Off the Edge if you don't appreciate edge rushers. And he's one of the best in the country. But even with him out, I was very, very impressed with Chris Braswell as well as Demoy Kennedy. But Chris Braswell was a guy that I considered voting for the MVP of the game. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was the one that got the forced fumble that allowed Deontay Lawson to score the Crimson team's only touchdown. So for him to step up and be a guy that can potentially get in a few rotational reps with the edge rushers with Will Anderson and Chris Allen, that speaks volumes to the efforts that Nick Saban and his coaching staff have put into recruiting quality edge rushers after really a long period of time where that position was really a barren wasteland of overhyped guys that never produced or eventually left.
Yeah, exactly. And with the combination of Braswell and Will Anderson, offensive lines and offensive backfield need to be very worried when they play Alabama this coming year. There's going to be a lot of pressure from the edge rushers. If you use them in combination, it's going to be deadly. And that's something that Alabama really, Will Anderson did a great job in the second half of the season last year after getting adjusted to, college football instead of high school. But aside from that, it's kind of been a while since there's been some solid edge rushers, and to have 2 on the same defense that are I think are both going to play very well this year, it's exciting, and it just goes to prove the point that you and I are making, and that this defense this year is going to be, I think it's going to be the strength of this team.
I do as well, and we're talking to Joey Blackwell of Bama Central, beat writer for many, many different sports, particularly football, baseball, and basketball, at Blackwell Sports on Twitter. Joey, I also am very interested in how the opposite corner from Josh Jobe, how that is going to play out. I argue that Jalen Armour-Davis played very well. He was just up against Trayshawn Holden. And I also argue that Kool-Aid McKinstry played very well. He was just up against Ajayi Hall. But they both made their guys fight for every catch and fight for every yard. And it ended up making their guys look really, really good. But I think it helped them as well in this battle to figure out who's going to be opposite of Josh Jobe. Obviously, everybody loves Kool-Aid McKinstry. You're the number 1 kid in the state coming in a top flight recruiting class. But when it comes to Jalen Armour-Davis, he's got the seniority to kind of help back him up a little bit. What did you see out of those 2 guys on Saturday and since that kind of helps you try to figure out who could win that job, or if maybe it has to be a rotation?
I honestly think it has to be a rotation. These are 2 stellar guys. If there had been a freshman of the game award, I would have no doubt given it to McKinstry. The guy he only had 3 tackles on the day, but he had an interception. He had that one of his tackles was a tackle for a loss. He broke up a pass, and then he also had a fumble recovery. So just welcome to Alabama football, go Quincy McKinstry. He had a spectacular day. And then on the other side, you do have Jalen Armour-Davis. The guy had 3 tackles, and he broke up 3 passes, which is the most out of any player on either defense in the game. I think you could use these guys in a rotation across from Josh Jobe, and I think it's going to be, once again, I'm going to use this word again, deadly. I think the combination of both of them, once again, kind of similar to the linebackers, it just shows how much depth they have in the DBs. This secondary, there's depth on the line, and there's just Alabama's just not going to get tired. They're going to suffocate opposing offenses because, hey, guess what? This guy's getting winded. Put the next guy in, and that's how Alabama's operated for years, but even more so this year on this defense.
We got to talk about the kicker. we got to talk about Will Reichard. I looked over and the guys that I was sitting with, they were just dumbfounded. They said he was perfect all throughout spring. He obviously he was perfect last year throughout the entire season, field goals or extra points, and it was a brand new feeling, and we got really used to that feeling. But 2 for 5 in on A Day. Yes, he did kick the game winner, but that was a 17-yarder. That's not going to impress many, especially on A Day. What's your impression of the bad day that Will Reichert had, and what's your confidence level that he's going to turn back into form into 2020 form when we're ready to kick off against Miami?
Well, I think, I'm not going to pretend to know, what was going on in his head, on Saturday. I'd like to maybe attribute it to nerves a little bit. I mean, it's the largest crowd that either team has seen in quite that this team has seen in quite some time. But I'm not going to pretend that I know what was going on. I mean, he made the first one, which was a 22-yarder, but then anything over 30 yards, he missed the entire game, and then he made that 19-yarder at the end to win it for the White. But I don't really know what was going on. And like you said, the guy was apparently electric in practice and has pretty much not missed all spring. He didn't have any misses last year, literally 0 misses last year, which, like you said, as an Alabama, a fan of Alabama football, that's hard to come by. But I'm not going to pretend to know what was going on. I think it was just an off day. Kickers have that sometimes. There's still the same thing as with Bryce Young. There's still a lot of time to improve, a lot of time to make a lot of kicks, and Lord knows he's been making a lot of kicks after that performance. But I have full confidence that he'll be back to his old form by the time September 4th rolls around against Miami. But definitely felt like an Alabama kicking game of old on this past Saturday.
That's Joey Blackwell. Joey, I'm gonna give you a second to plug yourself, whatever you've got going on. If you got a big feature coming on or an event that you got to cover, now's the time to do it, my friend.
Everybody can follow me on Blackwell Sports on Twitter. Of course, visit BamaCentral.com. We actually have a really cool series of stories documenting the 10-year anniversary of the Tornadoes coming up. I'm personally writing a feature on Sarah and David Patterson, of course, former Alabama gymnastics coaches, and I had an interview with them and talked to them about their day back in April in 2011, and it's going to be I think it's going to be a solid feature. I hope everybody can read it, and we'll have a lot of stories heading into the anniversary on April 27th. And of course, we'll also have a lot of NFL draft coverage coming up, and how we have weekly profiles on players and preparation for all that in late April. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very busy. And of course, there's always baseball and softball and all that coverage. But, as the semester winds down, the sports are winding down, but it's still a lot of fun, and we'll be there every step of the way.
Joey, I can't thank you enough. And I've said it 100 times, folks. I thought I was a great writer when I got to the University of Alabama, and then I met Joey. He's one of the best in the entire city. Go check him out on Bama Central at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter machine. Won't be disappointed. Joey, thank you again, man. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jacob. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's Joey Blackwell. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge. We're going to run to the break that we so desperately need to take. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about the guy that I thought was the star of the show. Everybody has their opinion on who they thought it was. A lot of people point to the quarterback. A lot of people point to a certain wide receiver. And I'm inclined to agree with those, but I also have another guy in mind. We'll discuss that and more on the other side here on Off the Edge on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. My name is Jacob Harrison. Thank you for being with us on a Monday. Hope you enjoyed the conversation with Joey Blackwell. It was a lot of fun. Love catching up with Joey. He's got a great mind for these sorts of things, and he makes me sound good too, which is a plus. Big thanks, Joey. I teased going into the break that we would discuss who I thought was the star of the game, and for me, I understand why people like Ajayi Hall. I really, really do. 4 for 72, nothing to scoff at. Paul Tyson gave him some dimes too. I agree with some of the talking points that Paul Tyson didn't get enough credit for some of the throws he made, and I agree that it's difficult to get a proper evaluation on him with the offensive line struggles. He's still clearly the number 2. You can look at it both ways. It is possible. But with Ajayi Hall, I think that Kool-Aid really did have his number for much of the game. And that's credit to Ajayi Hall for making the plays that he did. And not all of them were on Kool-Aid. I understand that. But I think that was a fun back and forth battle that I often found my eyes following in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I greatly appreciated watching those two work as freshmen out there on the field. It was a lot of fun. And I understand the excitement around Bryce Young. To go out there 25 of 44, mightily impressive. 333 yards. He did have some timing issues. That's to be expected in the spring. But overall, confident in the pocket, accurate. I mean, incredibly accurate. At times, it felt right. You know, like there's obviously a drop off from Tua to Mac to, and not necessarily in that order, but from Tua to Mac to Bryce Young. Bryce Young's a sophomore, hasn't started a game in the NCAA. Like I get that, but it's on the same kind of level that they do. That accuracy is king. He's got a good arm. He doesn't have a rocket arm, but he has a good arm and he can make all the throws. I think he did a good job when he was pushing the ball downfield, and I think he did an excellent job on RPOs and those sorts of things where he had to stick it in there. I felt really good about all the quarterbacks' arm strengths. Honestly, Braxton Barker's got a gun, guys. The first one launched downfield, and then he hit Tal Jones Bell on that slant route. He gunned that thing in there, and I was sitting next to Dad, and he was pretty proud about it. I gotta say, his ears kind of perked up when Braxton was announced in the game. It was interesting, but for me, the guy that I took away from all of this was the guy that got 14 targets in the ball game. The guy who was the number 1 wide receiver on the field, I think. Didn't make all the flashy plays that Ajayi Hall made, and again, no slide on Ajayi Hall for all of his plays being flashy. Like it's you don't have to have a happy medium, and everybody that thinks that Ajayi Hall was the star of the game, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you. I just really liked the consistency of Trayshawn Holden. He did have at least 2 drops by my memories count, and that's frustrating. But 9 catches for 89 yards and was the number 1 targeted receiver on the field, and he made his plays count. And he fought with the defensive backs, most often Jalen Armour-Davis, and looked really, really good. And it looked like he had the most chemistry out of any other player with Bryce Young. And that carries over. Chemistry between a quarterback and a wide receiver it's tops, man. It doesn't get bigger than that. You want to know why Devontae Smith was able to catch so many passes from Mac Jones? It comes down to the talent of both guys, but it has so much to do with their chemistry. That their ability to know what each other are doing on every single play, because it's not as simple as it is in Madden, where you tell your receiver to run a slant and that's it. The receivers have to read defenses now too. And the quarterback and the receiver reading defenses at the same time got to know what each other are doing. There's a lot more a lot more option routes these days than there have been in the past. There's still designed RPOs where it's a slant no matter what, and you got to win inside if you're the receiver. Don't get me wrong. But there's a lot more that goes into it nowadays than there has been in the past. These offenses are very, very advanced. And for Trayshawn to be the guy to go out there and earn 14 targets from the number one quarterback on the roster, that is very, very impressive to me. I think that gives him the greatest opportunity to go out and be the quote unquote number two, whether it's the X or the Z or the Y. I don't understand that terminology because I'm not an offensive guy, but Slade's the number two, but he's the slot. So the other outside guy opposite of John Mechie, that's your guy. I think that's Trayshawn Holden. And I think he can do that job very, very well. Even when we get into the bright lights and he's got to go up against number one cornerbacks or against number two cornerbacks, I think he's got that within himself. The other guy that I'm excited to see get more reps and to hear about over the summer and into training camp, I know I'm looking ahead here, that's Keelan Robinson. I know he didn't get a lot of touches Saturday. I know he didn't make a lot of noise, but I really like Keelan Robinson and where his headspace is at. As far as being a competitor to get on the field. Now, I mean, yeah, he had 5 touches on the day for less than 20 yards. That's a little disheartening, but you can't show everything off day one. You can't show everything off at a day. I was very surprised they even ran a wide receiver pass. Blown away that Alabama would try to do such a thing, but nonetheless, the play was broken up. It didn't work anyway, but those are the guys that I'm really, really liking out on the offensive side. I already gushed about the defense, but offensively, that's where I feel good at. Now, on the offensive line, I still have cause for concern. I don't think that Tommy Brown did bad. I don't think that Kendall Randolph did bad, left guard and right tackle respectively. And of course, Chris Owens and Evan Neal are great players. They're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about them. But if Tommy Brown and Kendall Randolph are that much better than what the white team tried, or excuse me, what the Crimson team trotted out there for the second team offense, that's worrisome. Now look, I like J.C. Latham. I like Tommy Brockermeyer. I like T.J. Ferguson. I like all those guys. But I wouldn't feel very comfortable about any of those guys stepping up and having to be number one guys in case of an injury. It just would not be a good situation for Alabama. Bryce Young would be running for his life back there, and that's a serious problem. You cannot have that in an offense that predicates itself on timing. This offense is different than what Sark ran under Bill O'Brien now, but there's a lot of similarities there, and we could all see it. It still felt like the same Crimson Tide we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, right? Heavy passing and a consistent run game, and especially now with this running back by committee they're going to have to go through. You need to be consistent as pass blockers across the offensive line, even more so than as big mauling run blockers. That being said, I still think that you're fine if if your offensive line from left to right is Evan Neal, Tommy Brown, Chris Owens, Emil Ekiyor when he returns, and Kendall Randolph. You got to stay healthy. If there's one place on the entire field, if there's one group of position that Alabama must stay healthy at, it is without a doubt offensive line. Now, granted, last year, the only injury was Landon Dickerson very, very late in the season. But if there's one cause for concern that I have going into the summer, that's it. It's offensive line. Certainly time to improve. Certainly offensive line is usually the most behind out of every position group. But nonetheless, you got to see that improvement by the time it's time to take on the Hurricanes in August. Otherwise, Alabama's, I'm not going to say in for a bad time, but it'll be something to have to continuously keep an eye on, similar to how kicker situations have been before Will Reichert and apparently now with Will Reichert. We'll take a break. On the other side, for the second hour, the plan is to stretch out and discuss my 3.0 mock draft. 2 rounds. We'll focus on the Alabama Crimson Tide guys. Don't worry. But we'll also, just take a good look at what I've got going on in there. That's the plan for the second hour. Tommy Paradise, who's producing the show, he's going to help us out in that hour as well. We'll be right back for more Off the Edge on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
A Town Square media station. WTUG HD2 Northport. And W265CG Tuscaloosa. Tide 100.9. And streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. The pressure is on. Lights out. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Quarterback back at the 5. Steps up. Gets drilled. Yes, sir. He gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. Alabama wins the ball game.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Go! Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Hello there. Welcome back into the second hour of Off the Edge. We're going to dive into my 3.0 mock draft, the second to last one that I will do for the rest of the year. We are steadily approaching the 2021 NFL draft. I think we're going to see 7 guys from Alabama go in the first round, and we'll dive into all that here in just a bit. But first, I got to tell you, first of all, I appreciate everybody that tuned in during the interview with Joey Blackwell. Great friend of mine, but also an incredible mind and an incredible writer. Go give him a follow at Blackwell Sports. Big thanks to him for joining the show tonight and discussing A-Day. Also, thanks for hopping in and being vocal in the comments section. If you're about to get home or you're listening on an Alexa device or the app and you're near a computer or on your smartphone, you can always watch the show live on the live streams, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube at Off the Edge 109. That is the best way, I think, to enjoy the show, the best way to interact with the show as well, because then you can join us in the comment section and bring us your questions and comments there as well. You can always join the show as well, 205-342-9904. And I look forward to anybody's comments on the mock draft. If you want to call in at any time during the second hour as well, 205-342-9904. We will still discuss A-Day as well. That's still fully on the table. But before we get into the mock draft, one more time, let me tell you about Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com. You see the Jeff Gordon vintage hat that Tommy Paradise is putting on his best QVC face for. Charlie, has all sorts of items of similar ilk inside the store under the crimson awning across from City Hall, 2210 University Boulevard. What it can be Alabama Crimson Tide vintage apparel, but it can also stem out to NASCAR, as you see with Tommy's hat, and also with NFL apparel, NBA. I've seen all sorts of different things in there. I'm seeing hockey jerseys and baseball kits and all sorts of things in there. So you got to go in there and you got to check it out for yourself. You'll walk the aisles up and down and you won't see the same thing twice. New things will just stand out to you is what I mean by that. Incredible store. And whether you need apparel or memorabilia, they've got it all. From older generations back from Bear Bryant and also up until around 2011, I think is some of the younger stuff in there, commemorating some of the early years of the Nick Saban era. There is something for everybody inside this store, regardless of where your fandom is, unless, like you're an Auburn or a Tennessee fan. But hey, if you're that kind of fan, I mean, I did pick up a Peyton Manning jersey from his time with the Indianapolis Colts for my son. So, I mean, you might be able to find something in there, but nonetheless, Crimson Tide fans of every style, of every mindset can go into Alabama Vintage or check them out online, alabamavtg.com, and find something to increase that level of fandom, whether it's in their apparel or in their memorabilia. You should also follow them on social media at Alabama Vintage, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That way you can keep up with all the latest styles and sales. So I'm going to hit a magic little button right here, and we're going to, whoa, that's Tommy's face. What happened there? Hey, get out of there. We'll do this. Hey, that works. We'll do that.
I guess we can see both of each other.
Yeah.
Today, isn't it?
So what we're going to do is we're going to use this fancy little StreamYard thing. Again, big thanks to James Ludeman for introducing me to the wondrous styles of StreamYard, which helps us stream to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter every Monday and Friday. And we're going to dive into my third of 4 mock drafts for the draft season. And of course, the top 3 are pretty much set in stone, if you ask me. Jacksonville, we've known since they clinched the first round, the first overall pick back at the end of December. That is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a Jacksonville Jaguar. And hey, I mean, the guy even said as much over the weekend when he donated back to a Jacksonville charity after being given so many gifts from his wedding from Jacksonville fans. He donates back to a Jacksonville charity and says, I can't wait to hopefully be with you soon. He knows. Everybody knows. So there's no point in dwelling on it. Zach Wilson's the guy for the Jets as well, even though he has said in the past that he would like to, he feels like he would be the best fit in San Francisco. That's just not how the cards played out. He is going to the Jets. The Jets have basically all but admitted it as well. Now, the draft actually starts at 3, where the 49ers have traded up with the Miami Dolphins to take a quarterback. They've been open about that. They are taking a quarterback. The smoke screen was that it was going to be Mac Jones. You don't have a situation like this where the second a team trades up before the draft and they instantly say, this is who we're getting, and that's who they get. Not at 3. Maybe at 1 or 2, not at 3. At 3, that is not working. The fact that Mac Jones' stock rose so high when that happened, the fact that Justin Fields plummeted, is enough to say it's Justin Fields. And now they've started to level back out, right? Justin Fields is back on the rise after his pro days. Mac Jones is starting to level out in his stock a little bit. And it's all starting to make a little bit more sense. You dive into a few other nooks and crannies to see how Kyle Shanahan has impacted both guys' pro days, or how he didn't impact Mac Jones's pro day. And that raises the confidence meter that this was a smokescreen all along. I'm seeing more and more mock drafts that have come out in the past 3 or 4 days that are now only saying Justin Fields at 3. So I trust that very, very well. I was one of the first ones to say it. Justin Fields is already getting fitted for that beautiful number 1 jersey out in Santa Clara. Now this is where things get interesting. Now, if you were listening to Tide Tonight, they said that this wasn't enough to move up from 20 to 4 for the Chicago Bears to take Trey Lance at Atlanta's pick. A 20th, the 83rd, and a 2022 first and second round picks to trade up 2-4 from 20. No, that's not a lot. And I considered the idea that maybe the Bears would also give up a player, but that takes away picks. So it's pick your poison here. And would the Bears be willing to give up a guy like Khalil Mack or Kareem Jackson to go get a quarterback that's not going to play right now? Regardless of who they take right here, week 1, he's most likely not the starter because Nick Foles makes too much money and Andy Dalton makes too much money. It does work out, though, because here they do get Trey Lance, and Trey Lance is a guy who doesn't have to play right now, a guy who's only played one football game in the past calendar year. That's the guy that you want in a situation like that. You want a guy that's got to sit and learn and improve upon the abilities that he brings with him. That's Trey Lance. I think he is. I love Trey Lance. I have him as my 5th best quarterback because I don't think he's the one ready to play right now. But that's a matter of opinion. But I still think he is more than worth this pick at 4. My question now to Tommy Paradise, who is the resident Atlanta Falcons fan here.
Yes, I am.
Are you happy with moving back all the way to 20, or would you have rather Atlanta in this situation stayed put and taken Trey Lance themselves?
I would think that staying put would probably be the better choice, just because the other player that's really been bubbling up for Atlanta is Kyle Pitts, the tight end. I don't know if he's selected because we're going pick by pick, obviously. But if you have to bank on, if Kyle Pitts is the guy Atlanta wants, you have got to bank on the fact that he's going to be there at 20. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying
he's not.
That. Yeah, exactly.
He won't be.
So unless Chicago, like this is a mock draft, and it's a good mock draft, obviously, because you made it.
Of course.
But here's the thing. If they're going to move back to 20, where is Pittsburgh again? They're 24. Okay. So let's just go crazy for a moment here. And Atlanta's thrown up the biggest smokescreen. All of a sudden, and I hate to say this because I've said it on record that I think this person is going to Pittsburgh. What if they're trying to throw off and be like, okay, maybe we want Najee Harris. And then that just throws everything into chaos.
Well, it only throws things into chaos for those behind 20 that want Najee Harris. And I think, everybody's got their contingency plans in case that maybe doesn't work out. Let me ask you this then.
Okay.
Because I know we've got a lot of Atlanta fans that live in Tuscaloosa as well, as evidenced by the number that are in this building. I feel like from my point of view that Atlanta has the sense that with Arthur Smith in to run the offense now, if they can find a good value running back in the 2nd or 3rd round, preferably the 3rd round, that all they've got to do is really balance out the defense, find pieces for the defense, get the defense back up to speed with the offense. Because the offense, at least early in the season, had no problem scoring points. It was the defense that would just bloodlet points late in games that would result in losses. As the season wore on, they started to stop allowing that quite as often. But on that front, if you do trade back and you stockpile a few picks and you start building up this defense, do you feel like Atlanta in that situation would be able to return back to a full-time competitor status for as long as they've got Matt Ryan now, wait on the quarterback deal until Matt's done? Do you feel like that's a situation that Atlanta feels like they could possibly be in?
I think so. Definitely with Atlanta, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is, right now they only have one QB in the QB room. Matt Schwab retired.
Schwab retired.
That's very hard to say. Matt Schwab retired. That's very hard. And they released Kurt Benkirk, who I thought was a good kid. When I watched him play in the preseason, I was like, okay. And then my brain kind of switched back to, oh yeah, that was, against the Broncos, like the 3rd stringers. So nothing against Kurt, but I don't know if he would have been able to run the offense in the transitional QB. Atlanta's defense has been lacking, but you said Atlanta scored early in the season, and I think that was just based off they played Seattle, whose defense was kind of at that point.
Yeah. Dallas's defense wasn't great.
The onside oops, as I called it. I mean, my goodness, that was everything and anything that could have gone wrong for Atlanta did. That was the game where I thought, oh, wow, okay, maybe the first game was just a fluke and then everything fell apart. But also the other thing that I kind of factor in is as much as I love Dan Quinn, and I did think he was a good coach in the beginning. Obviously, he took us to a Super Bowl. His style of, okay, we're going to go kick you in the mouth really didn't translate on the field. And I'm not sure where it went wrong, but it was probably because we were going through different coordinators and all that stuff. Steve Sarkisian didn't work out, which stinks because I love him. More props to him in Texas. And Dirk Cutter couldn't call an offense. I mean, my goodness, Jacob, you could have picked up the play calling sheet and ran that better. Dirk Cutter didn't know what was going on, and it pained me every time when it was like 3rd and 15. Okay, we're going to run the ball. No, you don't run the ball on 3rd and 15. The little old lady who sits in the top of the fruitcake and stadium knows to pass. You pass the dang ball. You got Julio flipping Jones and Calvin. Oh my good Lord, what did Ridley just do?
Yeah.
It was an embarrassment of riches in terms of what you have on that offense. And I'm with you. I think the defense does need some love. I think Dean Pease is going to be fantastic. It's a change up. Not to say Raheem Morris was a bad coach, but there just need to be a shakeup. I'm going to miss Keanu Neal. I will admit that. He went off to Dallas to join Dan Quinn. Ooh, I'm really losing it tonight. Someone needs to give me a shot in the arm in terms of names. But I think a change in coaching staff is what Atlanta needs right now. And I wrote on Tide100.9.com a while back. I just want to see something different from Atlanta this year. If you make the playoffs, I'll be a happy little clam. I'm not expecting a complete flip in terms of team because this is a new coaching staff and everything.
Yeah.
If you get over the hump and go, well, we're at 17 games now. So if you go 9-8, I'll be okay with that. I'm not saying Atlanta's going to be terrible, but this is a transitional year in terms of things. And the other thing that you mentioned was running back, and I apologize, I'm talking a lot.
You're good.
ETN has been a name that's been floating around too that people have been trying to figure out. I was talking to a friend. Maybe ETN just falls to Atlanta. Now, they'd have to use their 2nd-round pick and pray that he falls there and hope that they could trade back into the 2nd round and maybe flutter a player or two. But if they trade all the way back to 20, I say, I mean, Najee's right there. He's a good player. He's like Derrick Henry, except lighter and can catch passes and basically do all this stuff.
He's Derrick Henry's size with Le'Veon Bell's skill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if they trade back to 20, I'm going to trust everybody. The thing is that Atlanta's right now is a complete flick of coin. Maybe tomorrow it'll be, oh, they're thinking about Najee. And the other day, no, they're thinking about Penny Sewell. It's like,
yeah, Atlanta's been one of the toughest teams to read because really, why would you trade out of that spot? But also, so many teams are going to give you so much to get to that spot and take their quarterback, especially if they're confident that Atlanta's not going to. I get the feeling you're probably not going to be too crazy about what I did for Atlanta at 20, but nonetheless, moving on to the next few picks before we take a break. Cincinnati taking Jamar Chase. The kids on Tide tonight also gave me flack for this one. And listen, this is one of those where I trusted what I've been seeing out of mass mock drafts. The majority of them are going with Jamar Chase reuniting with Joe Burrow, and I think that is a viable situation as long as you play the rest of the draft wisely. There are offensive linemen, good ones, that will be available at the top of the 2nd round. But if the Bengals are ready to compete with Joe Burrow right now, and that's the nature of the NFL right now, is you get your quarterback and you compete for Super Bowls out of the gate with him if he's elite, and Joe Burrow's elite, he proved that last year, you're going to have to keep him on his feet, and that means getting offensive linemen. So I've got something in store for the Bengals later in this mock draft as well. Kyle Pitts to Miami is no brainer. If he's there at 6, he's not getting past him. I hear all this talk about Miami's willing to trade back again. It was reported by Ian Rappaport earlier today. Not buying it for a second. That's a smokescreen to try to get people to not be willing to trade up ahead of them because they feel like they're not going to get Kyle Pitts, and that's all baloney. Kyle Pitts is very much still on the board at 6. Now, Friday, I said my one bold take for Jalen Waddle, for the NFL draft this year, was that Jalen Waddle would be drafted before Devontae Smith. I got to work into this working on this mock draft, and it turns out Jalen Waddle might just be the first Alabama Crimson Tide prospect selected in this year's NFL draft. I don't ask me again next Monday. I don't know how confidently I feel about that. But right here with the Lions, I think that is a home for him. I think that is somewhere that he could thrive. He steps in, he's instantly the number one target, and I think that is just a brilliant way to see if Jared Goff's got it by giving him a guy that can move up and down, side to side, every which way across this offense and pick up yards and score from anywhere on the field. I think that's what he brings to the table in the NFL, no matter where he goes. But for the Lions, that's what they need more than anything. They need a number one receiver again after losing Kenny Golladay. That's no shock. But I think with Jalen Waddle, it's a situation very similar to what happened last year with Henry Ruggs going ahead of Jerry Jeudy and ahead of CeeDee Lamb. Henry Ruggs not the best receiver in last year's draft, but he was the most enticing because of his speed. He was the most explosive. He was the most likely to score at any given point. And the Raiders said before last year's draft that they needed guys that could score points. Now, Ruggs didn't do a lot of that last year. He was a rookie. He was the number one receiver on a team that had no veteran wide receivers. It was a recipe for disaster, and that's exactly how it turned out. And maybe that would be a similar situation for Jalen Waddle. But just reading the tea leaves and the precedent set by the NFL and the way that they operate this NFL draft, the way franchises and front offices look at it, it's painting a very clear picture that it could be Jalen Waddle as the first wide receiver other than Jamar Chase and technically other than Kyle Pitts, but at least the first Alabama Crimson Tide prospect selected, and especially the one drafted ahead of Devontae Smith. At 8, we got Carolina taking Penny Sewell. It's a no-brainer. He's the best player on the board, and they need help on the offensive line regardless of who their quarterback is. We're going to take a quick break and come back and dive into more of the mock draft. If you want to call in, you got thoughts on some of these selections, want to get a jump start here about what your team is doing in this thing, you're more than welcome to call into the show, 205-342-9904. If you're watching on a stream or you're about to be in a situation where you can watch on the stream, strongly encourage you to join us in the comments section. Ask any questions, whether it's NFL draft or A-Day related, whatever it may be, we'll get to it as well. It's the best way to join the show. My name is Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge. We'll be right back right after this for more on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Boy, it has been a Metal Monday all day on Tide 100.9. I love it. The influence. He's in his element. Let's go. My name is Jacob Harrison. Welcome back into Off the Edge. So glad you could be with us on a Monday night. Diving into my mock draft, but hey, you can join the show any way you please. If you're watching a stream, you can always comment any comments or questions, and we'll take that up. Feel free to follow us on social media at Off the Edge, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. A lot of good content coming that way very, very soon. You can also call into the show 205-342-9904. You have any questions or maybe missed earlier in the show about my thoughts on A-Day, feel free to call in and we can discuss that as well. I'll drop this draft talk in a heartbeat to talk A-Day with you as well. We're about to get into some more Crimson Tide players in the NFL draft in my third mock draft of the year. My only two-rounder one. Two-rounders, those ones they're hard, okay? You're scratching your brain at pick 55 like, you know, this guy could be gone at 23 for all you know. Like it's rough. It's kind of difficult, but nonetheless, we're here. We're at pick 9. Micah Parsons to the Denver Broncos makes too much sense. I keep seeing them in a situation where it's like, oh, well, maybe they'll take a quarterback. Maybe they really like Mac Jones. I think John Elway is sick and tired of getting burned by bad quarterback picks. I think that if Drew Lock doesn't work out, he is going to live and die by free agency for the rest of time. He has got to be just so over it. And I can't blame him. And the last thing he needs to do is make another questionable choice at quarterback where he's got to play a guy much sooner than he'll be ready. When you can just go get a guy that will vastly improve the defense. Micah Parsons does that. And it's not a good fit for Mac Jones. It's not a situation where he's got to go in and play behind a subpar offensive line, throw to Jerry Jeudy and a whole host of just really okay players. It's not a great situation for him. A lot of roster turnover on their offense over the past few years too. Like they haven't been holding on to guys and developing guys. That's just not a good situation for him to be in. Micah Parsons, on the other hand, though, I mean, that's a perfect situation for both parties. Now, the Tide Tonight kids kind of gave me grief on this one, but I have contended for a long time. I told intern Michael, who dipped out on us after the first segment, got to get those finals in. Better than some other debauchery he could be up to, but nonetheless, I told him a long time ago that the Patriots would trade up into the top 10 to take a dynamite wide receiver that can help bolster their offense for the future. Now, he and Kendall, both Patriots fans, wanted to give me the grief for trading up for anything other than Trey Lance when they could possibly get up to 4. I know Tommy's Falcons would love to have Stephon Gilmore should he get healthy, plus the picks that come with it. Of course. But Devontae Smith is the guy for the Patriots. It makes a lot of sense to me. I've got the feeling in my gut, which could be totally wrong. You go with your gut in these things. It's all speculation and opinion. But I feel like the Patriots would be willing to give up Stephon and their 15th overall pick just to move up to 10 with the Cowboys and take Devontae Smith. And the Cowboys would very much like this one as well, because then they don't have to worry about Devontae Smith going to their rival New York Giants, who love Devontae Smith. If there's one thing that we know, it's that Devontae Smith will not make it past 11. Even with the Giants signing Kenny Golladay, they love Devontae Smith. They will take him in a heartbeat if he makes it to 11. Don't be surprised if maybe the Giants trade up to go get Devontae Smith too. They really, really like him. If they can't get him, though, a guy that I've seen mocked to the Big Blue quite often is a guy from a Big Blue university. That's Kwity Paye of Michigan. He's pretty much my favorite pure edge rusher in the class. There's just not as many red flags on him as there are some other guys. There's a lot of guys with injury history problems, a lot of guys with character concerns, a lot of guys that are missing that one piece in their game. With Kwity, you know what you're getting out of him, and he can make an immediate impact on a defense that hasn't had a serious pass rusher in a long time. They've been focusing on that offensive line. You can't really blame them. The Philadelphia Eagles get Patrick Surtain with the 12th overall pick, and I think this is a match made in heaven as well, because pairing him up next to Darius Slay, that makes one of the best cornerback tandems in the NFL right out of the gate. Patrick Surtain has got the goods. I can see why he should be possibly the first defender taken in the NFL draft, but nonetheless, I don't see it actually happening. I think Micah Parsons has helped his stock enough in that regard. Still, though, I mean, I feel like I'm being fair, but I'm also being pretty generous. 3 Crimson Tide players in the top 12 feels right. I mean, you'd like to see that 4th. We haven't gotten to Mac Jones's name yet, but nonetheless, I mean, this is still a big win for Nick Saban and the program. You want to have those guys go in the top half of the draft, and 3 guys here who all play on the outside, where Alabama is still obviously very strong. Wide receivers love to come here. This is quickly turning into wide receiver U for the NFL. So nonetheless, Patrick Surtain, 12 to the Philadelphia Eagles. Then we get Justin Herbert some help on the offensive line. Get Rashawn Slater. He's the real deal. I think I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he actually goes ahead of Penny Sewell, just based off of his build compared to Penny's, and also just the tenacity that he plays the game with. I think I would not be surprised if a team fell in love with him, drafted him in the top 10. But LA gets him here. Minnesota gets Azeez Ojulari from Georgia to round out their edge class. The Dallas Cowboys, they come back to 15 and they get Christian Barmore. Now listen, Ian Rappaport also reported today that he heard from a high-ranking decision maker, the words that he put it. Jesus, Joe. The comment section is a wild place. That this defensive line class is so bad that you're either getting Christian Barmore or you're getting nobody. And I think that's a big reason as to why Christian Barmore's stock has skyrocketed the way it has. He's the only interior defensive lineman going to Cleveland for the draft. And there's been a lot of rumors that he is going to be the guy that goes in the top 15 quite unexpectedly. Now, I have him going right at 15 to the Dallas Cowboys in a trade back, but I feel like with Barmore, he fits the need. But if you're going to take an interior defensive lineman, that is, you're going to take Christian Barmore, or you're going to wait till the 3rd round. You've got no other choice. And the Cowboys really need that guy. Now, I have also heard it directly from Daniel Jeremiah, that the NFL feels like he has a lot of boom potential, but also a big bust potential. If there's one team in the NFL that doesn't care about that, it's the Dallas Cowboys. Look at how they have gone after guys like CeeDee Lamb, how they went after guys like Aldon Smith, guys like Randy Gregory, Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith. Half their roster is boom or bust guys, except for the guys that once made up the best offensive line in all of football. Dak Prescott was a boom or bust guy, drafted in the 4th round too. You take him in the twilight years of Tony Romo's career, and it panned out, right? He's the guy now. He's the one with the fat contract. But I unplugged my headphones. But I still feel like that Christian Barmore is an excellent fit for the Cowboys, whether they decide to maybe trade back into the. I also unplugged my camera. What is
now they're just staring
wrong
at me.
With me, right? Yeah. Now you got.
I'm doing something here.
Now you got to look at that guy. I'll reset my
rainbow hat.
But nonetheless, I really like the idea of Christian Barmore heading off to the Dallas Cowboys. It really fits the entire nature of who the Cowboys are as well. I gotta reshare my screen, so we're gonna just take a break so that I can fix these
All
things.
I did was unplug my headphones.
Accidentally, I talk too much with my hands for radio, but I'm also on screen, so I have to be animated too, I guess. We'll work on it. It's all working out the kinks. It's all these rookie mistakes. Shame on me. We'll be right back for more Off the Edge on Tide 100.9. Yeah. I like that one. Keep that one in the rotation.
Just picking randomly, honestly.
I know, but good Lord. I like that one. Hey, when you can't play the stuff you know and something sticks out to you, take it. Take it. Welcome back into Off the Edge. My name is Jacob Harrison. We got Tommy Paradise producing the show and blasting some great tunes as well, keeping it heavy on a Metal Monday that is perforated throughout the entire station. I love it. McKalen, sweet little McKalen of all people, throwing out some heavy metal on Tide tonight. It was wonderful.
We still have to talk about, and it's probably not the time to do this, how Michael was scared of One by Metallica.
I mean, every time I gain respect for that kid, it's just,
I'll say it, man.
gone.
One has one of the greatest intro riffs of all time. If it doesn't give you chills or it just makes you want to sit there and air guitar, I don't know what will. And then the rest of the song is perfect.
It's not even my favorite. It's not actually really close to being my favorite Metallica song, but it's still like, it's about as good at songwriting as it gets, even for a Metallica show like myself. So we just got done discussing Christian Barmore to the Dallas Cowboys after the trade back for the boys from 10 to 15. Bryant Horn's Arizona Cardinals. He told me he liked this pick. J.C. Horn falling to 16. Not everybody can be a top 15 pick, even when they're top 15 talent. J.C. Horn, in a lot of people's minds, is the number one corner, but you'd be hard pressed to find any mock draft that actually thinks he's going ahead of Patrick Surtain. Because we're in that stage where it's starting to be more of what people feel like the NFL teams are going to do themselves rather than what the analysts and scouts feel like they would do in those situations. So J.C. Horn makes a lot of sense for the Cardinals. They need cornerback help before the wide receiver help. I'm seeing a lot of Jalen Waddle falling to 16 and going to the Cardinals. Not buying that for a second. The Las Vegas Raiders need offensive linemen. I keep seeing Owusu Koromora going to the Raiders here. It would be a perfect fit, don't get me wrong, but when you've got no offensive linemen and you've got a bunch of young players on your offense and a quarterback that isn't very mobile, go take Elijah Vera Tucker, fit him in somewhere on the offensive line and continue to build that thing. Tua Tagovailoa gets Kadarius Toney to give him one more explosive weapon in his offense. I feel great about Kadarius Toney in the first round. I know a lot of people don't particularly like the idea. That's their problem. Kadarius Toney is a guy that can score from anywhere on the field, very much like Jalen Waddle. You just need to fine tune a few pieces of his game, unlike Waddle, and make him more of a threat down the field, like Waddle. And you've got an excellent player. But nonetheless, in an offense that features Tua Tagovailoa, you're oftentimes trying to get the ball out of his hands very quickly, especially as they try to gel that offensive line together. What better guy to give a pop pass to? What better guy to give a jet sweep to? What better guy to throw a bubble screen to? What better guy to throw a drag route to than Kadarius Toney? That one makes too much sense for me to pass up. The Washington football team get their quarterback. It's Mac Jones. Resident Washington fan Joe Will of the intern staff told me he appreciated this pick as well. So I feel like I'm doing good by at least half of our fandom around Tide 100.9. Nonetheless, I think that this is a good situation for Mac Jones because it is a pretty solid team in Washington. Now, granted, they won the division and went to the playoffs with a losing record last year, but nonetheless, they've got a solid defense. So now that all the focus is let's build the offense. Let's get this offensive line back in order. Let's get some weapons and let's find our quarterback of the future. And our quarterback of the future doesn't have to play right now because we've got quarterbacks on this roster that we feel really good about. And obviously you start that with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick can make a lot of something out of the bunch of nothing that resides in Washington. But that being said, he's going to have one of the best teams around him that he's seen since maybe his time in Buffalo. Or excuse me, Tampa Bay. He had a great team around him in Tampa Bay. Obviously, the same team was paired up with Tom Brady and just won a Super Bowl. But this is a good situation. He's got more talent around him here than he did in Miami, and he did a lot with what he had in Miami. So moving on to Washington gives him an opportunity to kind of get all these guys gelled up, make this offensive squad that is cohesive and works well together. And then when the time is right, throw Mac Jones out there. I think that is a great home for Mac Jones overall. Now we get back to the Atlanta Falcons, who picked at 20, and Tommy has kind of been looking back and forth at me. Trevon Moehrig is the best safety in the class, and I contend if the Falcons just focus on the defense, they've got pieces on offense. Like if you draft the quarterback at 4, great. If you draft Kyle Pitts, you're overdoing it at this point, because if the offense could score 45 points a game already, and you go get Kyle Pitts, okay, great. Now you can score 52 points a game. You know what I'm saying? Like that gives you like 1.5 more touchdowns per game, which isn't a disgrace on Kyle Pitts, but there's only one football and the offense is already stacked. So you got to build the defense. And if you can build the defense right now, why wouldn't you? And Trevon Moehrig is a great place to start on that trail. And 20 is right in the range of his value. If you can get him between 20 and 25, that's where you want to get him at. So I think that's a good place. You mentioned Keanu Neal, how you're going to miss him. Well, replace him, So moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, they get Rondale Moore, who is one of my favorite players in the entire draft. You don't have the kind of pro day that he had. You don't have the kind of production that he had in his first 2 years of college. And then all of a sudden just drop out of the first round. I'm not buying it. I think there's smoke screens here. I think there's shenanigans going on. I think Rondale Moore is a bona fide first rounder. And while Indy has pieces, and Carson Wentz certainly has no excuse to fail in Indianapolis, he should rebound his career immediately or get out. If he had a guy like Rondale Moore, that only further helps the cause. That gives him one more weapon. That is bona fide. That is 2 running backs, one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL, and 3 knockout wide receivers that all do things differently and can all score from anywhere on the field. T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, and then Rondale Moore. And then Mo Alley Cox is one of the best tight ends in the NFL too. Tell me the Colts aren't a contender after that. If Carson Wentz is right. If Carson Wentz is right up here. That's an incredible team. Not just because of Rondale Moore, but when you add him to that equation, it spells good things. The Tennessee Titans get Greg Newsome. I always consult with Mason Woods about what to do with his Titans. He signs off on it. Greg Newsome is the pick after losing Adoree Jackson. Asante Samuel Jr., whose father played for a long, long time with the New England Patriots, goes to the rival New York Jets because the Jets desperately need quarterback help before they pick up that offensive lineman a little bit later. Go get daddy's kid and hope he can turn into the same kind of guy and go torment daddy's team for the next 10 years if you can. Asante Samuel Jr. to the New York Jets. Then there was Najee Harris to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You knew it was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. I'm in control of this. I write down the names. I determine where they go in this mock draft. You're fooling yourself if you think I'm not going to finagle and tell you why Kadarius Toney is such a great pick for the Miami Dolphins and why the Atlanta Falcons should trade all the way back to 20 and not take a running back. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself. Najee Harris, I said it. He's the size of Derrick Henry with the skill of Le'Veon Bell. So you're telling me the Steelers can have Jerome Bettis and Le'Veon Bell at the same time? Thank you.
Really?
Really? That's cool.
Yes, it is. It's very cool. And I'm very much on board with it. Now, listen, the Steelers fandom is very split. And according to reports, the Steelers are down to 3 guys. Tevon Jenkins, whose pro day they did not go to. So that would break a very strong rule in the draft process for the Steelers. And you guessed it, my 2 number 1 choices for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Najee Harris, Landon Dickerson. I would scream with joy if the Steelers picked any of those 3 players, because those were my 3 top options for the Steelers at 24. If they decided to stay put and not trade back, those are the 3 guys that I wanted more than anybody else. Najee, of course, the most. But here's the thing. As I've also seen throughout the day, should the Steelers take a running back in round 1? What do you mean? Are running backs valuable enough to take in the first round? What do you mean? Najee Harris is the best running back in the class. And I can say that on Tide 100.9. I could go across the state and go say it in a cow pasture radio station in Auburn. I can say it out in Notre Dame while I'm doing hurdles. I can say it out in Ohio State. Whatever. No one's going to disagree with me. He's the best running back in the class. He's also got the best character among almost anybody in the entire class, regardless of position. Why in the hell would the Steelers not take Najee Harris? Well, because you need to build the offensive line first. No, you're right. A running back's nothing without his offensive line, and running backs will be the first one to tell you that. But you also are fully aware that either Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, or Miners could all be there at 55, right? Or an offensive tackle. Like, you're telling me the reason I shouldn't take a running back is because a running back will be available later, when the exact same thing applies to offensive linemen? I understand the value of running backs. I did an article not too long ago about why fortune actually does not shine on Alabama running backs ever, because they're always drafted in the first round or in the high second round. And it makes it impossible for them to be successful because teams have a difficult time building around running backs that are selected in the first round. Almost every single one of them. The most successful statistically, at least statistically, running back in the NFL the past 15 years, Adrian Peterson, has never won a playoff game. The most successful running back statistically of the past 5 years, Ezekiel Elliott, never amounted to anything. Derrick Henry has almost gotten his team to the Super Bowl. Almost. A running back does not win you a Super Bowl. A quarterback does. Love Derrick Henry. That's just the nature of it. All that being said, if you're trying to fix your running game, you can put a great offensive line in front of bad running backs and watch what happens. Because that's what I've done the past 2 years as a Steelers fan. Because James Conner wasn't good. And the Steelers had an okay offensive line up until last year. And the running game was still terrible. I exist on Steelers Twitter. I know a lot of our audience base doesn't. I'm just here to say that if Najee Harris goes to the Steelers, expect to hear a lot of negative things about him because he's a guy that speaks his mind and because he was the guy that was drafted in the first round as a running back when almost nobody does that anymore. And, you know, everybody's going to say, oh, the Steelers are archaic in their way of thinking. Guys, they haven't been able to hit on a running back after the second round since Le'Veon Bell. What are they supposed to do? Go take the best football player on the board. If Najee Harris, Tevin Jenkins, and Landon Dickerson are on the board, Najee Harris is the best player available. I want Najee Harris on my football team. Is that so much to ask? Going to 25, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame, the hard-hitting linebacker, can kind of serve as a nickel backer, kind of a pass coverage linebacker for the Jaguars as he develops. This is the one time that this is the only way I feel comfortable with the Jaguars not taking an offensive playmaker at 25 is if JOK is there to make their defense look just a tad bit better. And then Jamin Davis, the linebacker from Kentucky, to the Cleveland Browns. His stock has been skyrocketing since his pro day. People went back and watched his film, and it all worked out. I said the Bengals could do something about that offensive line a little bit later. People want to jump to conclusions. Michael. Kendall.
Got him.
Yeah. Christian Darrisaw is a top 15 talent, and you just took him at 27. And the way that this mock draft has fallen, Darrisaw falls, you trade up with your rival, don't have to give up a whole bunch to go do it, and you plug this guy in at right tackle, and you don't hurt anybody's feelings. I know that sounds really odd to say about a football team, but Jonah Williams will not play left tackle. He is only a left tackle. And if you draft Penny Sewell in the with the 5th overall pick, do you think he wants to be the 5th overall pick to be a right tackle or to be a left guard? No, sir, he does not.
He wants to be a left tackle like he would be for the Carolina Panthers, who drafted him in this mock draft. They're people, and people think that way. The New Orleans Saints take Caleb Farley, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech there as well. I know there's a lot of Saints fans out there who might not like that pick because of all the injuries to Caleb Farley. The needs for the Saints aren't so pressing that they can't take guys that they have to wait on. So I would feel pretty well about that one. I'm sure you can already tell who the 29th pick is for the Green Bay Packers, but we will discuss that on the other side of the break. When we come back, we'll finish up the first round of the mock draft. I encourage you to go read the second round as well. Check out the full mock draft, Tide109.com. We'll be right back for more Off the Edge. My name is Jacob Harrison, right here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
Two-minute warning on Off the Edge. Ooh. Wasn't expecting that bass. Okay.
Change up.
Let's go. Okay. I'm ready now. 2-minute warning on Off the Edge right here on Tide 100.9. My name is Jacob Harrison. We got 3 more picks to go through, so we're going to be quick about them. Green Bay takes Landon Dickerson because of obvious reasons. If the Steelers can't have him, the Packers will, because the Packers lost their longtime center, Corey Linsley, who's one of the best in the league. So you got to replace that kind of guy. And listen, Daniel Jeremiah has said this on multiple occasions. Dickerson is the best interior lineman in this class, if not for injuries. Now I dropped a lot of guys because of injuries in mine, but I also still keep them relatively high. Landon Dickerson should be a first rounder. I understand the concern when it comes to these injuries, but dude's already doing cartwheels 4 or 5 months out from his injury. He'll be good to go.
And if he's not, listen, he's going to eventually be good. If he's not ready 100% on that knee his rookie year, well, you still got him 3 or 4 more years on contract as a first-round pick. He's going to develop into one of the best centers in the NFL. Wholeheartedly believe. I'll make a stake bet with somebody and make do on it in 3 or 4 years. He's going to be one of the best. Zaven Collins to the Bills is cheating, but here we are. Zaven Collins to the Buffalo Bills. Jalen Phillips and Gregory Rousseau are the 2 edge rushers from Miami to close out the first round. Both the Chiefs and the Bucs need some edge rushing help, and not necessarily immediately, but these 2 guys were thought to be top 10 picks at the start of the process right after the NFL draft concluded last year. So if you can keep them healthy and develop them on these 2 teams that have great pass rushers, you got something special on your hands once you get rolling. We appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Had a ton of fun talking 8A with Joey Blackwell. Big thanks to him. He was awesome. Thanks to everybody that listened to that portion of the show. If you miss anything, everything is always archived on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, as well as SoundCloud at Off the Edge 100.9. Big thanks to Tommy. Big thanks to Joe for hanging out with us for almost the entire night and chatting it up with us. Until Friday, roll Tide.